Thank you, Alan, and Melina, thank you, and thank you all for coming to hear the next speaker. So, serious games is something that has become hugely popular, as I'm sure all of you are aware. I've noticed a number of education centers have now got a chair of serious games and so on. So I don't profess to be a particular expert in this area, but I will share some experiences that have really opened my eyes to how this is something that we have underutilized and I think is going to become a part of all of our lives in future. So the first thing is a disclosure slide. I've added a few things here, particularly on the research side. Most of that stuff is not relevant to this discussion, but the research partners at the bottom are part of a very large grant that we have right now for developing virtual reality computer-based simulation and incorporating serious games into that technology as a part of the research. So I'm not going to talk about any of that research in my talk today, but I put that out there for your consideration. And Tommy, I'll have to put Sense Graphics in here at some point, hopefully. So many people meet me and they look at me and they say, how is it that you maintain that athletic physique and the washboard abdomen? And because it's always hard to find time and motivation. And so here's the game bike. Now, I don't own shares in this company, and I don't know that you can still buy this, but I have one of these in my basement. This is a health club quality exercise bike with the magnetic flywheel at the bottom and the computer on top, so you can do everything you can do in the Hilton exercise room. The other thing it's got, though, is steerable handlebars, a PlayStation controller bolted onto the handle. It's connected to my PlayStation controller at the front of the room where I have my 7.1 surround sound system, and that screen is a 92-inch projection screen. So when I go to work out, this is what I do. And so that's ATV Off-Road Fury. And if I go on the treadmill here and I manage to burn all of 200 calories, I'm very proud of myself. I can drink an extra can of Coke. But I can go downstairs to my basement and try and win the gold cup on the national challenge and will burn 700 or 800 calories, dripping sweat, can hardly walk afterwards. But it's about trying to beat that last ATV to the finish line. So obviously the motivation here is the competition side of it. So this is a perfect example of what makes me tick. And I think there are many other individuals who find this type of thing very engaging. So we all know about Anders Ericsson's work on deliberate practice in expertise and popularized by Malcolm Gladwell, but certainly Anders Ericsson has been working, I think, with many of you in the audience probably on some of your research. We do know that simulation in the laboratory works, and that's something that was brilliantly demonstrated a couple of years ago by the McGill group. And their demonstration that practicing on the Mistel's training system can actually advance residents by about 2 years in their skills proficiency as measured by their performance in the operating room. So this was a seminal publication. In addition to that, we have a paper out of Sweden where they took 24 medical students, randomized them to lap sim training versus no training, evaluated their performance afterwards on a pig model, and they found that the trained students actually performed better according to expert analysis. So there was value in working in a virtual reality environment, and they also found that they were more efficient. So believing in the value of simulation training, of course, this is what our simulation lab looks like, and we've got all types of simulators there, from laparoscopic to urology simulators to colonoscopy simulators. That's what the lab looks like when there's nobody there. That's what the lab looks like on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday and Thursday and Friday. And I don't know what your experience is, but unless we actually mandate that the residents physically have to be in the lab using it, those simulators sit there waiting for somebody to come and clean them. So this is something that was actually studied. So the group out of Boston, I think it is, incorporated the Pro-MIS simulator into their general surgery residency, and they offered all residents a mandatory 2-hour training session with a curriculum review, and then encourage them to voluntarily come back and use the simulators for the 3-month period following that. 93% of their categorical residents completed the training. In the 3-month follow-up period, only 31% of the residents came back even once to use the simulator. None of the PGY4s and 5s came back once to use the simulator again, feeling that they had a better experience in the operating room than using the simulators. Only one resident came in on their day off. Despite that, 87% agreed that simulation improved their skills and thought that simulation was a valuable tool. They just didn't avail themselves of that opportunity. And the conclusion in that paper was suggesting that maybe we should make simulation mandatory for the residents since they're not going to do it voluntarily. So I think there may be another solution to that, and that is to find a better way to engage the residents and motivate them. So there are a number of education theories out there. The self-determination theory actually talks about motivation and how do you motivate people. It talks about intrinsic motivation. There's motivation that is driven by an interest or enjoyment in the task itself. And there was a lot of research done in the 70s looking at school children, and they found students who are intrinsically motivated are more likely to engage in the task willingly, as well as work at improving their skills. So it's something they would do voluntarily. Extrinsic motivation is something that we are much more familiar with, which is the performance of an activity in order to attain an outcome or a goal, and it's usually in response to a reward or avoidance of punishment. So the carrot and stick. And of course the stick is usually the thing, right? If you don't go and use the simulator, you're going to fail, or you're not going to pass your exams or whatever. But offering reward is what a game is all about. So it's still an extrinsic motivator, but it's putting that carrot out there. There's also evidence to suggest that extrinsic motivations can become internalized over time if they're happening in an unthreatening environment. So if you think about offering individuals a chance to play a game or practice something where it's not a high-stakes environment, where failure is not a problem, you don't kill your patient, you don't flunk the exams, you don't get licensed, whatever, that there is belief that you will eventually internalize that and make that an intrinsic motivation. There's also a whole bunch of theories about how to design video games, and so this is one that I particularly like, which is just the GNS theory, and they talk about the balance between gamism, simulationism, and narrativism. The gamism being the competitive side. How exciting is the game, and how competitive is it? The simulationism side being how real is it? How close to the real world or the simulated world are you trying to create? And then the narrativism side being how much of a story is there? And almost all games, whether they're computer games or otherwise, can be broken down into some three-way balance between these three components, and different individuals, and there's significant gender differences between what aspects of these gaming components appeal to individuals. Some people like to play a game where they're just, building up a farm or a city or something like that, and they're not so worried about the invading forces. Other people will actually try to go head-to-head. Am I running out of time? Okay. When we talk about serious games, so there was a book, this was really coined in the 1970s. Serious games are concerned with serious games in the sense that they have an explicit and careful thought out educational purpose and are not intended to be played primarily for amusement. So I think everybody's pretty familiar with that notion by now. I'll tell you about some of our experiences. So back a decade ago, I was in Toronto, involved in the Surgical Skills Lab in Toronto, and one of the challenges that we faced there when I was brought on their curriculum committee was that they had dedicated 5 Thursday mornings of the year for the PGY1s to come and do laparoscopic skills training, cobra rope, bean drop, block transfer, all that stuff. They were the most poorly attended sessions of the entire curriculum. Nobody wanted to go. Why should I go and do bean drop when I can go to the operating room and participate in an actual live laparoscopic cholecystectomy? And didn't have the intestinal fortitude yet to mandate that you had to be trained to proficiency before you were allowed to go to the OR. So channeling Butch Rosser, who we have to recognize that he was way out there ahead of all of us with the Top Gun stuff, we created a competition. And we said there's going to be 3 days of practice, and then the last 2 days, we're just going to have a skills contest. And in 1 year, the laparoscopic session went from being the most poorly attended sessions to by far and away the most popular sessions. And the winners of the challenge in the first 2 years were neurosurgery residents and ENT residents, who at the time didn't realize how important laparoscopic skills were going to be to them. But of course, they've learned that now. We also offer a number of SAGES resident courses all over the country. We do some of those in Canada. One of the things that we found in our Canadian courses, that when we did the afternoon with the animals, we would have a room set up with FLS trainers and virtual reality simulators. There was 3 residents to a pig, so we would say, well, ideally, it's going to be 2 on the pig at a time, and then the third one would rotate off to the simulation room. Nobody wanted to go to the simulation room. So we said, well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a competition. And we're going to give out prizes. Whoever gets the best score on the suturing contest, whoever gets the best score popping the balloons with the endoscopy trainer. The last course we did like that, with a half an hour to go in the animal session, the animals were all sitting on the table with none of the residents at the table. Monitors beeping away, pigs still alive. Every resident was in the simulation room trying to get their fastest lap in and try and win that prize. So incredibly motivating to give them that competition. That probably says something about surgeons. Here's the Canadian Surgery Forum, and you'll recognize Dr. Leanne Feldman on the far right there and Simon Bergman on the left. So this is something that we're doing for our 5th year now. We created in Canada, a national laparoscopic suturing competition where we invite each program to declare one local champion and send them to the national meeting, where they then go through a qualifying round and then the 4 finalists face off at the meeting. And it's an incredibly high stakes environment. They're head to head. We've got judges standing there scoring them. There's no post suture penalties. It's, you know, if you don't do it right, you have to start over again. And they're up there doing this at the opening ceremony on the industry floor, and that's the audience that's watching them compete for the national laparoscopic suturing competition. So lots of great things come out of this. First of all, the young members of the Canadian Association of General Surgeons are highly engaged in the organization now because they all want to come to the meeting and win the suturing contest. The industry guys are thrilled because we flood the industry floor on the opening ceremonies night. And the main goal, that is the thing that I really wanted out of this, is we now have every general surgery resident in Canada furiously practicing laparoscopic suturing in the lab for whatever their reason might be, but we've got them all practicing. And we now, in my institution, have residents coming after hours and in the middle of the night when they're on call at 2 in the morning, they go to the lab to practice some suturing for an hour before they decide to go to their call room. So this is very motivating, and it's all about this gameism. There's a group from the Netherlands who have done a lot of work. Almost done. There's a group from the Netherlands who have done a lot of work on, they're the first ones to report on actually using multiple centers, linking them together, and having residents, even staff, competing on a laparoscopic simulator. The prize was you get a free laptop if you win, and they had enormous engagement. I won't go through the details of that study, but you can look them up. Just last year in the British Journal of Surgery, they published a very nice review of all of the commercially available games, serious games for use in surgery to enhance the training opportunity. Just a plug for what's going to happen this afternoon. If we can do this for skills training, the question is now, what can we do for knowledge? So what we designed this year was a competition called Ultimate Sages, where we took all of the SAGES enduring materials, FLS, FES, and all the SAGES guidelines, SAGES manual, and said, let's create a competition for the candidate members, for the residents, to see who can be declared the SAGES champion. We had our qualifying session yesterday afternoon. We anticipated that we would get about 20 people. 47 showed up for the competition. And the 3 finalists are now going to go head-to-head 4:30 this afternoon in a quiz show-like environment. It's not going to be Jeopardy, but it'll be like a quiz show environment. I hope it's going to be a huge amount of fun. Once again, what are we getting out of this? Hopefully we are engaging the younger element of SAGES, showing them how fun the organization is. But the secondary gain is, if this gets traction, and that remains to be seen, we're going to have all of our candidates actually reading SAGES materials and studying it obsessively so that they can come to the competition and win the prize. And so that's what I was just explaining. So I'll just skip over this quickly, but this was just an example of how you can actually structure a course, if you will. This is Lee Sheldon's course when he was in Indiana, where he, instead of scoring essays, he gave students, this is not surgery, he gave students points for completing assignments, and then they would level up. And so the way you got an A+ was to level up to an A+ by accumulating enough experience points. So clever idea. So last slide here. So just a quote, a teacher who is attempting to teach without inspiring the pupil with a desire to learn is hammering on cold iron. I'm going to try and twist that into some way of supporting my argument, which is being a good teacher is not just about providing them with the materials. A good teacher is somebody who motivates their students to learn. And you can think about all kinds of educational opportunities with younger children, with underprivileged schools and so on. It's not a whole lot different. You might say, well, you're a surgery resident. Why should I have to motivate you? You just need to learn how to do it. But the reality is we can teach our residents better if we do a better job of engaging them and motivating them. And Serious Games, I believe, is one way we can do that. And if you haven't seen it yet, if you're a TED Talks fan, go and watch Jesse Schell's DICE 2010 video. It's really eye-opening. So thank you.